Welcome to the podcast of the Consortium for History of Science, Technology, and Medicine.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the third session of the DHST Early Career Workshop Series, in which we will discuss the role of journals as a means of scientific production and dissemination. I will briefly introduce the four speakers we have in this roundtable. Silvia Figueirôa is a professor at the University of Campinas in Brazil, and she has edited several collective volumes, and she's doing particularly a great work editing what's said to be one of the most important books in the history of Brazil, science in Brazil. We have also Joseph Martin, who is associate professor at Durham University in the UK and chair of the editorial board of HSNS, Historical Studies in the Natural Science, and former editor-in-chief of Physics in Perspective, and is also book review editor of the British Journals for the History of Science. Doubravka Olšáková is a senior researcher at the Charles Institute in Prague, Czech Republic, and deputy editor of Centaurus. And finally, Tiago Saraiva is a full professor of history at Drexel University in the USA and co-editor of History and Technology, and a member of the editorial board of the new Cambridge History and Technology. As you see, we have a very distinguished team of panelists, and with very diverse as well, and we welcome them to discuss. Our discussion will begin with a brief comments of 5 minutes from each of the speakers on the role of journals for shaping the academic field. So each of you have 5 minutes to make some brief considerations that you think what's important for early career scholars to know about the subject. Then we'll move to the next section on in the breakout rooms. Please, Barbara, can you talk a little bit more about this part?
Yeah, thanks. Welcome, everyone. If you want just a general reminder of the DHST and the format of these kind of workshops, what we would like to remind you is if you are now here, and some of you in the last session pointed out they didn't even get the information through any commission of the DHST, but through within institutions or something like that. But we really like to encourage you to find out more about a commission that fits your field of expertise and try to get in touch with them, because often they organize panels and conferences. And so this could be a chance for you to present your work sometime in a conference. They often have newsletters, mailing lists, or if you don't find any information, just get in touch with the president that is listed on the commission. Second reminder is second reminder still on the same slide, Climerio, is that it's also a chance here to network among your peer groups. So if you have used the Padlet, you can leave a comment, you can get in touch and reach out to your peers here. You really have to use Padlet yourself. We don't moderate, we don't put you in touch because we can't do everything for you. You have to take initiative. So if you participate in these workshops and you find someone on the Padlet that has a similar interest, just feel free to reach out to this person, because it's a chance to organize something together in the future. Climerio has already said that before in a session that this was similar with us. We just met through conferences and we discovered similar interest and we started working together. And now we have forthcoming articles, which is exactly the result of our own initiative.
First, I would like to thank you very much for making yourself available for this. And we'll begin with Silvia Figueirôa. Silvia, thank you very much for joining us. So what is the role of journals in the academic discourse? Which kind of considerations about this question you think it's important for people at the beginning of their careers to understand and to know? Please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Climerio, and thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good night for those who are listening to us here. Thank you very much, Barbara and Climerio. I think this is truly a great initiative that you had for us all and for DHST as well. Well, I graduated as a geologist, as you certainly know, a historical science like many others, botany, zoology, paleontology. And shortly after, I began my master's degree and PhD in the history of science. So I tripled my roots in history, so to speak, which usually leads me to start my reflections with some historical aspects. That is the way I will try to contribute to the first general question Barbara and Climério proposed to us. I must also say that I have more experience editing books than journals. I was the editor, along with my colleague Luisa Gesteira, for approximately 5 years of the Brazilian Journal of History of Science. In my opinion, editing books or particular thematic issues in scientific journals that I did too, is easier than editing journals in general, as it is a circumscribed task that starts, develops, and ends focused on a defined subject. On the other hand, journals follow a continuous flux, constantly receiving new material from different scholars from various countries of unbalanced quality. Referees are not always available. Sometimes the subject of the paper requires a very specific expertise that is difficult to find. So, as we are all aware, academic journals have a long-standing tradition in modern science. Beginning in the 17th century with the Transactions of the Royal Society and the Annales of the Académie des Sciences de Paris, they have expanded in number, broadened in the scope, and diversified in focus. In a recent book on the history of scientific journals, Eileen Fife, Noah Maxholm, Julie McDowell Waters, and Camilla Hustvik remind us that the nature, organization, and purpose of scientific journals have a history. The 21st century scholarly journal was not created in 1665, but has been developed from a seed sown then, just as the practice of science has changed since the 17th century, so too have the practice of scientific journals. Their roots may be early modern, but the practices of contemporary journals also bear the legacy of intervening periods of history. Recognizing this historical development is important not just for historians, but for all those involved in thinking about academic journals. Practices that may be seen now to be written in stone have been different in the past, as there is every reason to believe that they will be different in the future. The authors of this book also proposed that history to be divided into some phases. The first one, invention, the second one, maturity and institutionalization, the third, professionalization of science, the fourth, the growth of science, and the last one, the business of publishing. We are all in the final phase, which can also be subdivided into some shorter periods, as the number of researchers, the volume of research, and access to documents and bibliographies have recently increased in astonishing ways, mainly due to advancements in computational resources. Thus, in my opinion, scientific journals remain the most essential form of communication for scientific production in virtually all areas, a relevance that has been historically established. Although, in the particular case of the history of science and technology, due to the hybrid profile of professionals in the area and their founding parents, the relevance of scientific journals has always been great. This movement has progressively encompassed the humanities in general. Books are still very relevant to us, but journals have a faster circulation, partially because they are published online first, and also because of their broad their broad scope. In my experience, as well as that of some others I know, it's more common and even easier for research institutions to subscribe to journals than to purchase books. And this would be also a reason to publish in journals. However, there are obstacles in the way of getting our research to interested audience. According to the aforementioned book by Fife et al., we are currently in the subphase money and mission in the digital age. My colleagues here, who are much more experienced in journal editing, can complement or contradict me, but I believe that publishing in good scientific journals is not restricted to having a quality, well-written, and properly formatted paper. It also depends on the level of autonomy enjoyed by the editors-in-chief and or their associates. This is because increasingly we have large publishers, such as Springer, Wiley, Taylor, and Francis, for instance, interested in making money in the digital age. There are more popular topics that will attract more downloads, interactions, and citations, while others, however well-researched and presented, will be considered of lesser interest and can be discarded a priori. Furthermore, some journals have executive editors from, let's say, technocratic areas, which can eventually serve as barriers before a more proper academic analysis. So, to end, in my case, my intention is not to discourage anyone. On the contrary, we must insist and continue to seek increasingly the circulation of our research with quality in the most comprehensive way possible. Anyway, these are my contributions for now, and we will continue talking. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Silvia. We go to the next speaker, Joseph Martin. Thank you, Joe, for joining us, and please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lemerio. Thanks, Silvia. That was helpful because it leads into some of the remarks I wanted to make. I don't have any slides. I'll just organize some loose remarks around 4 things that I would say journals do for scholarly discourse as a way to thinking about their role in the field. The first one is that they produce a version of record. This used to be the most important thing that they did, right? Because you needed skilled labor, you needed typesetters, you needed people who could work with cast movable type quickly, efficiently, and accurately. That's one of the functions that's fallen out in the digital age. Now, I guarantee you, all of you can do a better job of producing a version of your paper than Springer and Elsevier can. Some presses are better, but from hard-won experience, the big commercial presses are actually quite poor at producing versions of record these days. But we're left with a system that was assembled because we required that labor, because you required organizations built around skilled typesetters. That's created sort of the publishing world that we have. And what the machinations you see from the sorts of commercial publishers Silvia was talking about have to do with them trying to hold on to the systems of advantage that came out of that way of organizing scholarly labor. So that's the first one. A little bit more optimistically, they organized the conferral of an imprimatur. So this is something that we do as a scholarly community. We, as editorial boards, as referees, as editors, get together and say, we think this piece of research is interesting, useful, worth publishing, worth talking about. You can take a paper, put it up on your website, people will be able to find it, but without that social backing, without the imprimatur from the community that exists around a journal, people are not going to engage with it as much or as thoroughly. So that's still quite an important role that journals play. In the course of doing that, what they do is that they organize a developmental conversation that we hope improves the work, and in the course of doing so perpetuates disciplinary norms. So you submit a piece of work to a journal, The editor will read it, the editorial board will read it, referees will read it. You will get feedback. These are often people you don't know or don't know well, don't interact with on a daily basis. You are, through that process, exposed to perspectives, some of them quite sharp and critical, that push your work in different directions. So there's, through that process, when it's done right, that process really improves the work, puts it into broader conversation, helps scholars see the wider relevance of what they're doing, how it speaks to different parts of the discipline. And through that, we develop a disciplinary conversation. We develop the norms of scholarship. And finally, what they do is that they place research within a scholarly context and render it discoverable. This can be banal, registering for the sorts of databases, getting a DOI arranged for the article so that people can link to it and find it, getting it on the databases that people use, making sure that the table of contents of the journal that your article appears in goes to the ICE's current bibliography. So those sort of practical ways of rendering it discoverable, but also putting it next to other pieces of work that have something in common. By being in the same journal, they've been subjected to similar processes, they've been judged with a similar ethos, and people reading them, therefore, will situate them in a particular way because of how they appear in that particular journal. That's something that I think is worth keeping in mind in the current age of publishing, where things are often very fragmented. You go to look for a piece of scholarship, and you can very easily zoom right in on an article through various databases, searches, Google Scholar, things like that, that extract it from its context and give it to you alone. Thinking about that context, thinking about where the pieces of scholarship you're reading fit in a context, and also what context your work is going to appear in, I think is a big part of the baby we don't want being thrown out with the bathwater as scholarship moves in this more digital direction. So those are my very general thoughts on the issue, and I'll throw it back to Clemeria.
Well, thank you so much, Joe, for brief and thoughtful comments. So now we go to Doubravka Olšáková. Please, Doubravka.
Hi, I'm very happy to join you and to be a member of this workshop, because actually the historical introduction was great, provided by Silvia, and what Joe Martin just mentioned is fully covering what I wanted to tell you. So I'm sorry. So apparently we are working in the same field and we know how journals work and so on. So maybe I'm just going to, expand a little bit and make it maybe just a collection of tips for young scholars. So first of all, we should always think about academic journals as about journals and sources which are not just passive containers, but they are somehow shaping the field. They are just, creating the field as such. This is something that we very often forget, and we just focus on our articles and papers and the editorial processes and so on. But it's really important to bear in mind that, academic journals don't just reflect scholarship, but they are creating it somehow, together with conferences, workshops, and so on and so on. So editorial choices, what is accepted, what is revised, highlighted in thematic issues or discussed in commentaries, they are somehow reflecting the evolving boundaries and priorities in the field. As such, journals act as filters and amplifiers, helping determine which ideas gain visibility and traction. And there is a tip for young scholars that understanding a journal editorial scope and culture before submitting is really important. I mean, what kinds of questions does it consider valuable? What conversation does it amplify? That's here we have some questions which are important for young, for early career scholars to ask before you submit. So the second point is the review process. And we should not think about peer review as about, a hurdle or, a process that should intimidate young scholars, early career scholars, but as a formative process. Because in editorial practice, peer review is not a gatekeeping mechanism, which means to intimidate you, but it's a process which allows you to understand the wider scope of scholarship and the role of community of historians of science and technology, for example. So it should act as a kind of intellectual mentoring, as a collective effort to strengthen arguments which are published and to refine methodology and situate ideas in broader discourse, as I mentioned. So even rejections, which happen, and it happened to all of us, to early career scholars, but also to very experienced scholars. So very often the most painful part for early career scholars, as I mentioned, it's an integral part of growing, of becoming a really acknowledged scholar and researcher. So that's why it's really important to understand the rejection process, or the rejection as such, as a kind of, a challenge on the road of becoming a scholar. So my third point is that journals should serve as a forum for shared norms and dissent. So for early career scholars, sometimes it's very difficult to understand what's happening in journals. Why, for example, their papers are not accepted. Nevertheless, journals are somehow located in the field of negotiated knowledge. So that's why it's important to understand them as creating or co-creating shared norms and practices in the field. What does it mean for early career scholars? It means that they should not hesitate to write responses or, for example, critiques or conceptual interventions, since these are vital scholarly contributions, and it's not just a distraction from original research, but this is how we can contribute to the shaping of the field and for creating a forum of shared norms and dissent. My next point is has been mentioned by Joe, and it's about understanding scholarly journals as social and relational fields. So it's a way how to become socialized in academic community, how to meet new colleagues, how to expand your networks, and so on. So what is important for becoming a good author, academic author, it's to attend conferences, it's to attend workshops. It's not a separated process which has nothing to do with academic publishing, but it's a part of it. If you really want to become a good author, so you should be active in your fields, conferences, workshops, and so on. Because these often feed directly into editorial conversations and special issue ideas and so on. So really, this is a part of your submission process, if you want. There is one thing about publishing processes which I like the most and which are so rare, and it's about thinking about submitting your paper in long term. Think long term. How will your article help someone in 5 or 10 years to understand the field and to understand the topic better? Is it just a temporary issue that you are dealing with? And if yes, so how would you include it into a broader field? Or is it really a contribution that would shape the field for at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, ideally? So this is something to think about.
Thank you very much, Doubravka. Now we go to Tiago Saraiva. Tiago, thanks for joining us. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Climerio and Barbara for inviting me for this. So really exciting to be here and to see so many people joining and with names that suggest all different kinds of origins, which is always inspiring to see that. And again, as with the others, so I'm really pleased to be the last one here. So this was all really well programmed, and we knew each other what everyone was saying. Because so for me, like I will so after the more general comments of the previous speakers, I will actually speak more as in my role as a co-editor of the journal History and Technology. So I co-edited with my colleague Amy Slatin. I've been doing this since 2017. And it's from that experience, from that particular experience, that I would like to speak it to you. We assumed a role. This is published by Taylor and Francis, so it has all the challenges that were hinted at by my previous. So one of the big publishers, one of the ones making big money out of this business of scientific publishing. And so that's total disclosure. But the editors don't make much money. Not that they don't make much money. They don't make money out of this. So, and that's actually part of we can go into that because that's part of the problematic model here. But more to the point, Amy Slatin and I, we have assumed the role of kind of what we can call like interventive editors. So we really take seriously what Doubravka was saying about that. We don't consider journals as just receivers of scholarship, but that we acknowledge that journals, they shape the field, and we accept it, and we are excited about the role of editors also because of that role of journals as shapers of the field. And how does that mean? What does that mean? That doesn't mean like we just say, okay, this is not we get an article and we refuse these, or because it doesn't comply to our ideas about the field. It's not like that. It is more one of where the editors actually go to conferences. They organize special issues with authors. So there is a direct intervention. It's a small journal in the sense that it's not a journal associated with a major society. So, like for example, Technology and Culture, it's the journal of the Society of History of Technology. History and Technology gives us more room to do these kinds of things. And also in the present stage, of scholarship, where the online has been mentioned as well, also by both Joe and Silvia, the online is so important now. We do think that there is a relationship to there is something that the journals should be doing, and this comes out of our experience of that combining the online with the presence, with the importance of the presence, so with the presence of the workshops, with the presence of being in conferences. How do we do that? We not only go there, but the journal promotes such workshops and promotes such kinds of conversations. Small workshops, we put we are only 2 co-editors, but as all the other journals, you will see this. All the other every academic journal has this long list of people in the editorial board, and so this is like a very concrete advice. So when you organize, when you participate in a workshop, look for people. Look for people that participate, that are part of those of the editorial board of a journal. Like to help you organize not only your individual paper, but how to actually organize a session, or how to transform a session into a section of a journal's issue, or even a special issue by itself. So that's something that when you are going to conferences or or you participate in workshops, I would strongly recommend you to do, to have that kind of conversation, and that going back to the point of the online life of the articles, it's really important to see that those online articles, they don't show up alone. They don't show up alone. Even in the digital world, they normally don't show up alone. And it's not just a question of keywords and all that is important, but if you go to the page of the journal and see that then there are 2 articles next to it, this makes a difference. And we see that actually, we can see that on how articles are quoted. One more, so just to finish, I know that so our time is very, very limited. So one thing about this, about the role of journal editors and journals and editors in the current landscape of scholarship. So when you have this model of the interventive editor, which I think is something I would be willing to defend, you also you need editors to be ready to defend the authors. Okay? So that this is something that it's actually quite important nowadays. And when you have and so our journal, History and Technology, I think the journal now has an identity that turns around questions of historiography. So also something that Doubravka was mentioning. So it's a journal that values the conceptual interventions, that talks with the authors in order to promote those conceptual interventions. But then many journals might do this, but then the editors also need to be ready to defend authors when the authors then are put under pressure because of the conceptual interventions they make. Another way to put this, and to end my conversation here, there is a geopolitics of our fields, one of the reasons Amy Slayton and I accepted to be editors or to have this role of editors in history and technology is an acknowledgement of the geopolitics of historiography, in our fields, and that demands a certain kind of editor, but also demands editors that are willing to defend the authors when they come, when they are under pressure from a system that, yes, it has all that long tradition that it's present in it was obvious also from Silvia Figueirôa's presentation. So the Royal Society, that leads to very concrete hierarchies. Yes, many times to gatekeeping, things like that. So that's also part of the cultures of different journals. And I think that when you look for places to publish your your research, it's good to have a sense of the politics of the journal. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiago. I think this consideration is really very important, especially in time that science is under pressure from many places, right?
I would like just to invite the first group, Climerio and Silvia. Do you want to just present a bit what you had discussed and maybe also pick the questions that was developed in the conversation, and you can also then invite the other speakers to answer them.
So I can go summarize a little bit the discussions that were there. The first question was about the role of the negative impact of fees for submitting papers and fees for open access. Silvia recommended to avoid the journals that are predatory and charge fees for paper submissions. And the open access is a more complex question and involves like inequality in different parts of the globe. We didn't have time to address that. Another question comment was about this format and the media for presenting and discussing knowledge and academic knowledge. Like in comment, is there a point that is this written format in journal is still the most appropriate format, and will it stay for good, or may have another formats to present, for example, more digital, more in kind of videos and in visuals talks, for example. Another question that was very discussed there was how to choose journals, and should I go specifically, for example, should I go to the large famous, these big famous journals in my field, or should I first address some smaller journals that are more closer to my specialty in this.
I would just like to invite Doubravka. What is your opinion on that? So if I write this fantastic paper, and I believe it's the best paper ever written, what do I do? I go to the famous journal, or I go to a specialized journal? What do you think?
I think that we discussed the issue in our session, and we discussed the role of different journals on national and international level, because you can write a great paper that is highly relevant for your national community, but it's not so relevant for global community because you are focusing on special national, topic and so on. So it's really important to realize that, especially talking about historians, we are always bearing two identities. We are members of our national community, and our research should be somehow relevant for our national community, but it also should address global challenges. So if you are really convinced that you wrote an excellent paper that would deserve you a Pulitzer Prize or, a relevant prize, so you should go to the best journal ever, of course. But again, think long term. Is it really so relevant even in 10 years, or is it just relevant for you right now and right here?
I think that's an excellent question. I'm sorry that I was making a bit a joke of the prize-winning papers, but still, I think what is also important to say, if you just reach out to your peers and your supervisors, and they can also say and give you tips what they think of your paper. Is it where's a prize, a Pulitzer Prize? Or is it more in this and this direction? I think this is also always very helpful, I think. Climerio?
Yeah, I think I made the summary. I think this is an important question, like on open access. What is the impact of this open access, for example, in global inequality and access to paper visibility, for example, if you countries that cannot afford to pay for open access, for example, what does it imply for this academic discourse? Any of you want to step in to comment?
Yeah, so maybe this is just a quick thought, because some universities have contracts with great publishers, with Cambridge University Press or Oxford University Press, and they do publish open access. It means that their researchers are allowed to publish open access if and when they are, considered the leading author. So maybe it's a way how to promote your research, just to join a researcher that is based, for example, in Cambridge, and just ask him to write a joint paper. And this is one of ways how you can reach open access, even in publishing houses that would otherwise be too expensive, especially for early career researchers in developing countries or in remote regions. And it was, for example, also my case in Central and Eastern Europe. It was very difficult for me to reach enough money to publish open access, and collaboration is one of ways how you can just reach it.
I wanted also to address a little bit the open access question. So, which is, yes, it's very obvious from the numbers of citations and and readers of each paper published in history technology. Open access does make a difference. So it's like, it doesn't matter, like, even if you think that you wrote the Pulitzer Prize article, many times it won't get read because it's not open access. It has more probability of reaching that status if it's open access. That there is no doubt about that. Now, that said, there is all this issue that open access, it really puts it's really problematic on the how you get that status and how much you have to pay for that. In the case of our journal, the rates are very different from when you published in Europe, or when you are a scholar in Europe, or when you are a scholar in the United States or in the Global South. So it varies a lot. It varies by institution. You can negotiate that. Again, you can pressure the editors. The editors have a little bit of leeway in telling them and this we have done in our journal, of saying to the publisher, well, this is an article that, although the author doesn't have enough money, enough funds, this deserves, that this should be open access. So there is that as well. And then there is the other thing, which is, as Silvia was suggesting, and I think that it's a real thing, like go also for journals that look to journals. And I think that here the Brazilian Academy is particular relevant here. The work that is being done in the Brazilian Academy to where papers are open access without you having to pay. So avoiding the predatory practices that come together with open access. So again, it is a complicated landscape, and each journal has its own specific things. And so when you send an article to the journal, I would actually recommend that you ask the editor about their open access policy.
Good point. I see Doubravka short.
I appreciate how Tiago is promoting their journals, so I have to promote Centaurus as well. It's not only about history and technology where you can publish, it's also Centaurus. And the great thing about Centaurus is that actually we have Diamond open access. It means that it's voluntary, and we are funding our open access strategy through the European Society for the History of Science. So if you publish with us, it's automatically open access. So because it's funded through, the society budget. So just the website, check the website, and you will see.
It's an interesting and tricky one, because for some of the reasons Tiago outlined, open access is a great principle. It's a great idea. The implementation of it has been, in some cases, problematic because of unequal access to it, and because of the way that it's been used to consolidate the market position of certain for-profit companies. So I would just say that as a scholar, you're in a position where it's good for you if you can get that. But as a member of the broader community, to be engaged with these conversations about how it should be implemented, what we as a community should be doing to encourage the publishing ecology to move in particular directions.
Thanks. Good points to add that. So I've just moved to your group, Joe, now with Sabina. Maybe Sabina, you can also say and say what your group was discussing. And I see here also a very good point about finding appropriate peer reviews. So how do journals select the good reviewers? How does that process look like?
Thank you, Barbara. So we thought we discussed also the open access, but that was a good point to find good peer reviews. And Joseph gave actually a very good answer for this. Maybe he wants to talk a little bit more for the whole group.
Sure, I can do that. Well, first I'll say generally that the practice for how journals find reviewers differs from journal to journal, editor to editor. The way it's done at HSNS is that we have an editorial board of between 5 and 7 people. We have a list of advisory editors of about 30 people. What we'll do when we get a submission in is that the editorial board will discuss it, generate some ideas for potential reviewers. We'll then assign it to a member of the editorial team whose job it is to secure reviewers along with those suggestions. We'll pick somebody who has expertise related to that topic, and then they will go out and find those reviewers. When the reviews comes back in, the responsible editor writes a summary report, which then goes to the editorial board, and the editorial board discusses it. So that's one model for how the process can work. It's more involved and sometimes perhaps extends the process by a couple of weeks. But it is sort of a robust way to ensure that you are identifying appropriate people. I think as an author, a number of people express frustration with being in the situation of having submitted an article 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and not having a decision because the reviews haven't come in. And that's an extremely frustrating position to be in as an author. It's a situation in which you are often quite disempowered. There's not a whole lot that you can do. But the two things I'd say to summarize from our discussion is, and this applies more generally, you can and should have an open dialogue with the editor. That as an author, you're in conversation with the editorial team who's managing your paper. And if things have been taking a long time, it's perfectly appropriate for you to write and say, how are things going? Often editors are not remunerated in terms of money or time for this work. So they're doing the editorial job on top of a teaching job, a museum job, some other job that's taking up more than all of their working hours. And so these things can slip. Both for the editors and for the reviewers. So keep a dialogue open. If you repeatedly find that you have trouble with this, it is okay to suggest potential reviewers. The editors might or might not take it into account. You should always suggest people with whom you don't have a conflict of interest and make that clear. But that is something that you can do if you feel as though there's a danger of that sort of thing happening.
Thanks for the great answer. I think one thing that you pointed out, and we didn't really mention or go into in the general discussion, is that there's not just one editorial role. Each journal has different policies. Some journals, for instance, have managing editors that really keep an eye on all the work of the other editors. Some have chief editors that is really responsible for the journal. So you really can also have an eye on how the journal is organized back. But this doesn't affect the review process and what is going to be published. But just to make clear, there are different roles involved in different journals. So Javier, you want to ask a question, I see?
Yes, thank you very much, Barbara. I'm very sorry for being late, but I have one particular question regarding to choosing the journal by thematic, by subject. In some cases, when we write any kind of paper, we have a mixed subjects, right? For example, we take international relations with, for example, archaeology and so on and so on. So how can I pick in this case, the journal based on a specialization? Because, well, it's very fuzzy to define where the paper belongs. And sometimes the editor kind of criticizes, saying, well, you have to choose another journal. So this is something that I would like to ask you. Thank you very much.
So can I invite Silvia to talk first, because she didn't have the chance, and then Joe, you have a reply. But Silvia?
No, I don't have much to say. I will speak about more from the point of view of me as an author than an editor. You see that, well, we are Figueirôa too, so I can reply to him. Yeah, you see, there are, I think that we as authors, there are lots of good journals nowadays going on. And a good look at what the table of contents and the papers those journals publish, you can see if they are more open to interdisciplinarity or to boundary objects, and others are more straight. So I think that this is the first move, and then you try those more open when you have the more interdisciplinary or different subject in your paper, and also trying to make very clear in your text how it relates to the main subject and niche that the journal where you are submitting to approach, where it is situated. Then I think this would be a possible strategy, you see, to say, well, this is, I'm sending here also in a letter for the editor or editors. I'm sending to this journal because I see these and these and these contact points and possibilities of dialogue and interaction and so on. That's what I would say briefly.
Great. Javier, thanks for asking that question, because it gets to something I wanted to say anyway about choosing a journal, which goes back to, like, why do we publish things at all, right? Why are we doing this? The sort of cynical answer is, well, we're embedded in a system of rewards that means that we have to, otherwise we don't get to stay in the field. But that's a bad reason, really, to publish something. You publish something because you have something to say. And if you have something to say, you have something to say to somebody. So really, choosing where to publish should fundamentally be thinking about audience. Whom are you trying to reach? Who do you want to talk to? And that, more than sort of fuzzy notions about quality and prestige, should, I think, in an ideal world, really be driving where we choose to put our scholarship. So to give a concrete example, if I'm from where I work in Britain, if I want to talk to my community, my close community of historians of science, technology, and medicine, I'll probably try to publish in the BJHS, British Journal for the History of Science. I know that the table of contents alerts are going to pop up in their inboxes. I know that they're going to be emailed a copy of the journal. I know they'll see it. If I want to talk to scientists, I might instead go to Notes and Records of the Royal Society, because that's published by a publisher that also publish science journals. I know that practicing natural scientists are going to more likely to look at that, more likely to cite it. And you can get a sense of that from the journal's webpage, but also at looking at who is citing the scholarship in that journal. All right, look up some articles that are perhaps similar to your aims and objectives. Who's engaging with it? What evidence can you get about who's actually reading that? That will give you some sense of whether the journal is reaching the sort of audiences that you want it to reach.
Just going to follow up on what Joe said, because this is exactly the point. What community would you like to approach? I mean, where would you like to, become a member of such a community and so on? This is something to be taken into account, and this is something that is, a kind of strategic thinking about your publication. There is a subfield of thinking about, approaching new community through journals specialized in a different field. But this is a very hard job, and this is really worth wise consideration if you really want to invest time, your time, energy, and everything into such a process. And if it's not better to attend workshops, conferences, to become a member, if not a member of a new community, just to become familiar with members of your dream community, and to take a slower pace, tend to just submit your paper and just hope that it would be published somehow.
I would just want to add very briefly. So again, Doubravka and Joe made most of the points that I wanted to raise, but there is one thing that, so thinking about the publishing and sending something to an article, it's just not an individual, it's not just an individual task, it's not just an individual operation here going on. It's also something that you can discuss this when you are at the session, in some conference, in some workshop. This is part of the conversation. So again, not thinking about just this individual relationship between the author and the journal, but something that it's part of building a community. Oh yes, it's part of the discussion where you are at the workshop. What is the journal that is actually interesting to where this will find resonance? This is something that is part of the discussion in a workshop, or in the session where you first present your research. It's so try to. My recommendation would be to think about the publication process as part of the whole operation of being part of a community, and that is the discussion that is part of your community.
Right. Good answer. Now, because the time is a bit running, I think I try to summarize a bit from different discussions. I see this question of how do you consider language difference and origins? And Tiago, you already mentioned that several times, and I think this is because I now picked you first. You called it like kind of geopolitics of publishing. Could you just expand a bit more what you mean with this? What is the trick when you're not a native English speaker?
Okay, the geopolitics of historiography is that it's just recognizing that that our fields, they have very particular histories, and they have hierarchical histories, and and there are centers of the field that have more power, more money, and that have more publicity than others, and that has had an influence in the field. Many times it has most of the time pernicious influence in the field, and that we should acknowledge that when thinking about the role of a journal. So the language question, so it is always that is, I find, a major. That's I always found that as a major issue, is to keep an authorial voice, which in most of our fields that we discussed here, that has to do with history, it's important to keep that in your non-native language. It's very hard, and it's something that some journals are more open to that, others are less. Some editors will say, I know what is good English. You don't know, you are speaking, you are writing improper English, things like that. But it's, again, something that Joe also mentioned, is that the conversation with the editors about this should be open. So don't shy away from your worries about this when you feel that your voice is not, it was erased because of the way the translation is made, if you are not a native speaker. I would like editorial teams to be more that would acknowledge the difficulties of this, and that in order to have actually, a better field, not only more inclusive, but a better field in general, this is the question of language is something that they should be really reflexive about.
Joel, do you want to say something to add to this, because you mentioned that in your group?
Yeah, this came up as well. I mean, we're in a context in which English to a large extent become the language of global academic exchange, which is, a disadvantage in all sorts of ways to many types of scholars. I'd really echo most of what Tiago said. Talk to the editors. Often you'll find that editors are willing to work with authors if they're concerned about the language, right? Especially in a discipline like history, where voice and fluency are considered important parts of the framing of the argument. I've spent a lot of time doing that, line edits on papers that we publish. I'm sure other editors have as well. The other thing that we raised is that you might often have scholarship that you've published for one language community that you think might be relevant for another. And looking at publishing translations is not beyond the pale in any way, shape, or form, right? And that's another conversation you can have with an editor about, okay, look, I've published this article in Portuguese. I think an Anglophone audience might be interested in it. Would you be open to me publishing it, perhaps with these modifications, engaging with this additional historiography, something like that? So that's a way to think about navigating this context in a way that might turn that the linguistic landscape of the discipline to your advantage somewhat.
Thanks. I think that's a good point. So because time is getting a bit shorter and we don't want to run too much into the next hour, I would like just to invite every one of you just to add something that you think has not been said, or you really want to make a strong point for something before we end that. So we just follow again the alphabetic. So Silvia, what do you think is missing now in the conversation and you think you really want to underscore?
Well, I don't see anything really missing, but I would like to reinforce that something that was said by several of my colleagues, that we should not see, even when we receive very rude reviews, and this happens not infrequently, we should not be down, and we should try to think about, reply, select what is really a good point and a good criticism, than the parts that are very aggressive, and reply and change our paper, sometimes resubmit, sometimes we chose the wrong journal, and then do not give up. Never. That's what I would say to close, okay, the young scholars.
That's a good point. Never give up. So next, Joe, I think.
Yeah, this is a corollary to Silvia's point. I think one of the misapprehensions I often encounter in authors is that they think that in order to get the paper through review on a revise and resubmit, for instance, they have to do everything the reviewers ask them to do. And that's absolutely not the case. What you need to do is have a thoughtful, well-considered revision on the basis of the reviewer's comments. If there are things that you don't think are appropriate for that piece, or that just can't be addressed, articulate that to the editor. And that's something that the editors are going to weigh up. It's not a matter of, here is a laundry list of things that you need to do to your article in order to get it through review. You do that and you end up with a camel, a horse designed by committee, where you have these bits. You've all read these articles, right? We have bits that are clearly tacked on to mollify one reviewer or another that really don't fit with the general stream of the argument. So be aware that what we're looking for as editors is a thoughtful, generous engagement with the reviewing process, not necessarily a full response to everything that full implementation of everything that the reviewer said.
Doubravka?
Oh, okay, so I think that few points. Be proactive. The communication is the key, as we mentioned. Stay in touch with editors, with the editor-in-chief. Just communicate, engage with your community. And your community, it doesn't mean only community of global scholars, but also of local scholars, because global research is relevant on national level, and national research should be relevant up to a certain point on global level. So just keep on mind that if you publish anything in your national language, it could be somehow relevant for global community as well, if you frame it differently. This is the key, how to approach the dilemma between local and global. And the last point is rejection is a process. This is something that show you how to improve, how to expand your research, your field, and how to get familiar with different academic processes, starting from networking to writing an article nominated to a Pulitzer Prize.
Thank you, and again, I agree with everything that my colleagues said, and just one last point maybe that I would like to emphasize is that open access question. Going back to that open access question, and not only one of knowing and being aware of the open access policy of each journal, but also here. This is so we are part of a community that I would say that we haven't been the most proactive in general in open access questions. There have been initiatives, important ones, the ones that I know better, again, maybe the Brazilian one, I think that, and so this is not, again, this is Doubravka mentioned nicely that I was publicizing history and technology. Here I was to publicize what Manguinhos has been made, the work that Manguinhos has been making. It's like, it's really something very important for the global community, for the national community. It has I think that's an exemplary case, where you have things are published in Portuguese, Spanish, and English, and it's open access. And so but what does that mean for the whole field? Globally, I think that it's actually something that younger scholars should pressure a lot their peers, their older peers, and to bring open access to come up with I wouldn't say a policy of open access, but principles of open access in our field that should be shared, and that would actually also help editors going to their publishers and saying, this is what is being done, this is what authors are demanding. But so, yeah, being very proactive on the open access question. I think it will be one of my challenges here for this community.
Yeah, thanks all of you. Before Climerio gives the final thank you, I just want to add two things. One thing Doubravka always said, and I would really like to stress as a general thing, is really build communities and ask your peers before submission, before you even think this is a publication, just get out and get feedback, reach out to your colleagues. And the second point is really check the journals for the submission guidelines and what is the scope of the journal before you submit. This really helps a lot before avoid rejecting even, because then you see already the scope. So also check the journals of the speakers here. They are happy to receive your papers when they're ready to be published. So check the journals. Climerio, the final word is yours.
Oh, these final words, I just want to thank you all for this great discussion. It was really, it was above my expectations. Thank you so much. Really very nice discussion.
This has been a podcast from the Consortium for History of Science, Technology, and Medicine. For more information on this topic, as well as other podcasts, working groups, fellowships, and resources for learning, research, and teaching, please visit www.chstm.org.